Lajos Nagy,
61 years old writer, bookseller. Pest, District 6. We woke up at 8 this morning. You are allowed to be on the street from 9 in the morning until 5 at night. We are now at Aunt G. We came here just after 9. Mrs. G's flat is on the ground floor, with a window opening onto the narrow courtyard of a 3-story building. Because the courtyard is narrow and the house is high, the room seems safe from shelling, but not safe from bombing. Mrs. G has a whole shelter. Many of the people who live in the house sleep here, not daring to stay in the apartment on the upper floor. Besides, the windows of all the flats on the upper floors are broken and the cold is unbearable. I think there are hardly any windows left in the city. The people living here at Aunt G's are Arrow Crossers, or at least Arrow Cross sympathizers. Except, of course, the Jewish girl hiding with false papers. They are waiting for liberation from the Germans. Otherwise they feel the situation created by the siege is unbearable and they are desperate. One gentleman, who I heard was a member of the Arrow Cross Party, although I don't know this, is coming to his senses and has begun his transformation. He is berating the Germans. Mrs. G cooked us lunch. We provided the material. It was a good lunch, but I didn't have enough for half a tooth. It's true that I eat very little. My wife is saving our food. We had a hard time getting bread for the first time in a week. We made up for the bread shortage by eating part of our breakfast of fried soup, no bread for the other food, and part of the time my wife baked scones for tea. I got bread by sending Karchi, who is a soldier and comes to our house from Budapest, even now, to the baker's, and for this I gave him 10 penga, 1 kilogram of bread in 1943, 58 cents. For a soldier can go to the shop, out of queue. Civilians, mostly women, queue in the street and wait, perhaps for an hour or two. If a plane approaches, they scatter. The queuing is terrible. For weeks you have to queue for everything, now you only have to queue for bread because there are no shops open except bakeries, and I have had several occasions when, by the time I got to the counter, the bread was gone. Mrs. G baked us a cake. The cake did not turn out well. We had flour, yeast was provided by the housekeeper. The loaf didn't rise, it turned out to be a flat disc, which was like mud inside. We had dinner at home in the workshop, fried bacon, and toasted small slices of this mud disc. Our lighting is miserable. But we still find pieces of candles everywhere, and by their light we cook, bake, read the paper, play cards, chess. We can hardly see. Today, until 7 o'clock in the evening, has passed quite mildly. There was little shelling, hardly any bombardment.
Nick Shafenu,
66 years old writer, lawyer. Pest, District 8, Haransky Upka 11. This morning, the older brother of Teggy, T.A., a high school teacher, showed up. It was as if he had come to validate the portrait I painted yesterday of the petty bourgeois. The way he appeared, the way he introduced himself, the way he explained that his cold had disappeared because his apartment was 1 degree colder, the way he declared that no lineage is nobler than that of the German SS soldiers, every inch of him epitomized the petty bourgeois. Elvira could barely restrain herself, making objections that would undoubtedly warrant execution on the spot, but T.A., the history teacher, could not be deterred from his profound admiration for the German heroes. In contrast, the principal of Elvira's school speaks about the German occupants of the school on Práter Street as follows: the school is an SS hospital, staffed by SS nurses. 50 patients lie in the basement shelter, 15 corpses are in the courtyard, and there are the carcasses of 20 horses. Not a single SS soldier takes on the task of burying them. They do not leave the shelter for even a moment, while we run upstairs every moment, and they pour the contents of their bedpans directly in front of the shelter. A heroic worldview. A member of the Arrow Cross Party recounts here in the hallway that he and his comrades slaughtered 35 Jews during the night. A heroic worldview. Budapest's ordeal reads today's newspaper. 1 million people live in cellars, without water, without heating, and on meager rations of food. There is no telephone, no transportation, Houses are collapsing one after another, and corpses lie unburied in the streets, yet this arrow-crossed genius calls it an ordeal.
János Pentelényi.
34-year-old engineer. Buda, District 2, Olas Avenue, now Szilagyi Erzsébet Avenue, Air 17. Due to the water shortage, the situation in the only lavatory in the shelter, which lacked flushing, became unbearable. Thus, we decided to dig a latrine in the courtyard. After prolonged effort, the result of digging a pit in the yard for days was the emergence of groundwater. There was great joy, and the clay-colored water sufficed for washing, bathing, and flushing purposes. We drew 150 to 200 liters of water daily with a bucket lowered on a rope. In the meantime, news spread that water was flowing from a pipe somewhere on Práter Street. From that point on, daring individuals began to fetch water with buckets and demijohns, paying no heed to the dangers of combat. Professor Worms's courage inspired me, and I accompanied him. Carefully making our way from house to house, taking shelter under gates, we reached the destination. The street presented a harrowing scene of destruction. Freshly bombed and burnt-out buildings, fallen trees, tangled power lines, and torn shutters lay everywhere. In front of the Cartographic Institute, several cannons were in firing positions, and tank trenches crossed Olas Avenue. Turning left from Práter Street, among the smouldering ruins of a completely burnt-out barracks, we found the exposed water pipe from which water poured out in a wide stream day and night. We filled our containers and cautiously made our way back, sneaking from house to house. At the corner of Práter Street, near the edge of the sidewalk, we came across a fresh grave. A mother and her child were struck by a shell here yesterday while fetching water and were buried on the spot. In the doorways of the houses, German soldiers crouched with loaded weapons. With deadly confidence, they assured us that the relief troops had already reached Budapest.
Miklós Kovalowski.
High school teacher, around 35 years old, Kispist. The armor arrives for his usual evening visit. The Russians are already at the Kistext factory. The Germans have withdrawn from Kispist, leaving its defense to the Hungarian youth soldiers. However, their squad leader disappeared, abandoning the frightened boys, who fled. At the corner of Jótvos Street, a group of them was struck by a shell. He himself saw several dead. The Germans are now shelling Kispist from Erzsébet, and the house was likely hit by a German shell. He encountered an unarmed SS sergeant fleeing. Many are trying to hide somewhere in civilian clothes. Toward evening, there is great unrest in the basement. We are anxiously awaiting the Russians. We ask SZCS to receive them and act as our interpreter. The landlord flips through a Russian phrasebook, revealing that he has not only stocked up on drinks but has also prepared for the encounter. Ferry begins compiling a list of names and writes down the head count. As the senior officer, a warrant officer, he plans to make a proper report. Comrade, I respectfully report 12 men, 14 women, for children.